Hello and a very warm welcome back to Huw's Nursery, and we're here at Homemakers. This is Charles Dowding's garden, and one of the things which really strikes me every time I come here is just how abundant it is with food, no matter what time of year it is. So it's late March, and I thought, what could be more interesting than Charles Dowding showing us the types of things which he is growing, the kinds of vegetables, both annuals and perennials, to cover the hungry gap.
So the hungry gap, as I understand it, is after winter, because during winter you have a lot of vegetables which grew last year basically, and they're still putting on some growth now, but most of their growing happened before, such as leeks, and these leeks will continue cropping. They're coming into the hungry gap because they'll go on growing and cropping until late April. So that's a nice beginning. For me, hungry gap is April, May, into early June. So it's more the spring, because in the spring we haven't got the winter vegetables like the Swedes over there. You know, what a great resource that is for eating in winter. But they start to flower by the end of April going into May, so they go woody and they're not nice to eat anymore. So the hungry gap is about finding vegetables that crop rather uniquely just at that time of year, which is before the main summer flush begins. Quite a lot of our plantings here, like the Calabrese behind me, won't really kick in till late June. A lot of things get going towards the end of June, but not in May or early June. Another way of looking at the hungry gap is what I call it is winter's long shadow. So it's kind of the tail end of winter and going into quite a dark time. Not literally dark, we've got the sun now, but what we don't have is the harvest. And you know, even that garlic there, put in the ground last October, the cloves, they won't be ready till the end of June. That links back to storing produce for the hungry gap. You know, we've still got garlic in the house from last year, so that's another way around it. And onions that you can store for a very long time. So that's another way of having food to eat in this difficult time. The spring onions beyond the garlic, they will come ready for harvesting in May and early June, so that's a very nice green to have from overwintering. A lot of it's about planning. You know, you can't suddenly make things grow in the cooler spring to have to eat in May and early June. There is one really good vegetable though that you can grow from sowing in November, even December. A little bit from early spring, but the late autumn sowing is a very powerful thing. And let's go and have a look at that vegetable now, because it's looking really good. This vegetable is broad beans, because broad beans, unlike many hungry gap vegetables such as spinach and lettuce, which are good as far as they go, I wouldn't be without them, but they're mostly leaves. A lot of the early growth in spring is leaf. And this is fruit, seed, protein. And in fact, when I used to live in France, the people would talk about the value of the broad bean, the early broad bean harvest, because it came after, you know, so much other food was finishing, and it's really nutritious. You could eat, I guess, or they could eat a big bowl of broad beans, and that would keep them going for a day. So these were sown November last year. I actually sowed them in the greenhouse because of mice maybe eating them in the ground, or birds pulling them out. So I raised plants, put them in the ground in December sometime. Potentially you could put a mesh over, depends on the weather. And whether or not they survive winter, normally here they do, but we're in quite a mild climate. If you are in a colder region, do check out mesh rather than fleece to keep them surviving over winter. And then you've got this explosion of growth happening. You know, this is still only late March, they're flowering already. They were frosted this morning, so not all of these early flowers will survive, but basically the plants are strong, they're good. If they get to this stage in the spring, early spring, you can be pretty confident of getting a harvest by the middle of June at the latest. That is early in terms of getting big, solid food to eat. And we'll just have a look at one or two other things over here, which are also hungry gap. This is a vegetable I really appreciate as we're coming into the hungry time of year. Spinach. True spinach, not leaf beet spinach. So true spinach like this is actually, oh, there's a bit of a damaged leaf, but Basically, you know, we're picking quite small leaves at the moment to eat raw because it's so sweet and tasty. It's sweeter at the moment because of the cold conditions, like the frost overnight, and that encourages the plant to bring sugars into the leaves, which are kind of anti-freeze. So they're sweeter in the winter, even though they're smaller. And this is a variety called Medania, and I sowed it on the 10th of August last year in modules. Then I planted it between lettuce that were cropping at the time, in the spaces between. So it's basically at the same spacing as the lettuce was, but it was in the gaps between them. And then the lettuce finished, we twist out the lettuce and grow the spinach through winter. So we've had autumn crops as well, small crops in the winter. And then we actually had a big hailstorm here 3 weeks ago, and that's why we stripped a lot of leaves off the plants actually just last week, because they had a lot of this sort of pitting on the leaf, which doesn't make them inedible, but because I'm wanting to sell these leaves in my salad mix, we want nearly perfect leaves where possible. And so we cleaned up the plants. But basically these plants will produce a lot more leaves until early June, because the flowering time of spinach, this is the key point, is early summer. That's why you can sow it in August and it won't rise to flower. This variety particularly, Medania. And you therefore from August sowing you've got, it's in the ground for 9 months. You know, it's just a very efficient way of using your sowing time, your precious time in the garden. Have sowings that last for a long time, and this one going right into the hungry gap. And also with no dig and the compost mulch, I haven't actually put a mulch on this ground for 16 months now. So still strong, healthy growth, showing how efficient no dig is for using the resources you apply. You don't need more compost for no dig, if anything slightly less, because you're not oxidizing any carbon in cultivations. So spinach is great. Also actually just mentioned here coriander. I mean, look at that. So that coriander was again sown in August, late August in this case, planted here September, again between lettuce, and it's starting to go to flower now, but it's a nice spring herb as well as a winter herb, very hardy plant. And we just put in the new planting of beans around them because the coriander will finish soon. Here's another very long-lived crop which is really useful in the early spring. Chard. It's a ruby chard, this one. Even pink passion actually, this one is from real seeds. Really, really pretty coloured stems. And we sowed this one last April, so golly, that's just very nearly a year ago. Showing what a long-lived plant it can be. I actually found it best not to sow it too early in the spring, so I haven't sown this year's yet. I wait until late April even before sowing it. This was then planted around the 25th of May last year. We were picking it from late June right the way through. Either I pick the leaves as small salad leaves, or you can let them grow and have them for cooking, so there's two options there. But what a lovely plant to have, just giving you food over a very long period of time. And to finish this little video, let's have a quick look at some perennials behind me. So we're looking here at asparagus, that delicious vegetable which crops most heavily right in the hungry gap actually, May and into June. Hereabouts, normally the first spears appear towards the end of April, so in about 4 weeks' time. I'm curious though to have a look. I think the low nighttime temperatures are stopping it springing into early growth, which actually is better really, because it means it'll come strongly towards the end of April and then crop for 2 months or so. And in terms of no dig, it's really not difficult to grow. You don't need to make ridges and trenches. I'm just doing it on the level with a little bit of compost extra on what becomes a very slightly raised mound where the crowns are. So this is one crown planted 6 years ago. This is last year's stems. The other thing with asparagus is you're cutting off all the top growth and I put it in the path here actually. So this is all last year's growth, mouldering away, adding organic matter to the path. And we simply put maybe 1 inch, 3 centimetre compost on where the asparagus crowns are. So 2 strips here. It's just such an easy way of doing it, and the weeds don't grow much because we haven't messed around with the soil at all. So it's just occasional hand weeding, mostly picking when they start to grow. So that's a perennial that's yet to come in the true hungry gap, and we'll finish with a look at the rhubarb in this corner. So this variety of rhubarb is called Timperley Early, and it really lives up to its name. So before the end of March even, we've already been picking some. I mean, they're not the biggest at this time of year. The sticks, the stems will grow much fatter and longer yet, but you know, I'm just twisting them off like that. For this time of year, that is a really welcome harvest. You don't want to overpick at this time of year. Just take a few now and then, let the plants grow on, and well, yeah, what nice rhubarb. So this will go on cropping. We stop picking usually in early July, so its main period of harvest is late March, normally starting April, May and June, right the way through that time of year when other vegetables are not so abundant.